Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and there are so many iPhones to choose from. If you're thinking about picking one up, it can definitely be intimidating. But have no fear, for in this video we'll be going over every single iPhone you could be looking at every price range, from the $1,000 plus ones to the $50 ones. And yep, you heard me right, $50 iPhones. Of course, if you do go for the more expensive $1,000 iPhone 12 Pro, it probably won't cost you that much outright, especially if you go with a carrier and some kind of plan or contract. But for simplicity's sake, I'll be using American prices for the unlocked versions of any phone Apple is selling. And we will be going over the used market as well. I'll start with Apple's lineup on their website first, and if you want to skip ahead, I'll have timestamps in the description below. And at the end of it all, I'll have a summary for the best choices for each and every price range. But let's not dawdle and get right into this by starting with the best of the best, the iPhone 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max. Apple sells these for $999 and $1099 respectively, with 128 gigabytes of storage. A pretty penny, but at least we are getting significantly more storage than what's been available in the past for base models. These phones are terrific. They're the best of what Apple offers, and you can tell from the gorgeous displays to the killer camera systems. We have 3 lenses on the back offering ultra-wide, wide, and telephoto lenses, and of course there's the new cool LiDAR sensor, which means better low-light photography among other things. As great as these phones are, and as much as anyone would love them, they're really darn expensive. There's not much point of buying them unless you purposely want the best Apple offers and have the money to back it up. But they're going to be overkill for most people, and the iPhone 12 offers nearly all the same features for a much lower price tag. Of course, with the 12 Pro you do get that frosted glass finish instead of the glossy glass, which I personally prefer and I think looks a bit more premium, but that's just my opinion. And again, that 12 Pro is so darn expensive. So let's move to one small peg down the totem pole with the iPhone 12 and 12 mini. Great phones, nearly just as great as the Pros for a much reduced cost. The iPhone 12 mini costs $700, the regular 12 $800. The regular 12 is actually my daily driver right now. It's the same size as the smaller 12 Pro at 6.1 inches and is the perfect fit for me. It feels very premium, it's so fast, and the cameras are amazing, although you don't get that telephoto option that you would have with the Pro. But the displays are OLED this year. In the past, the cheaper models would have cheaper screens, but you're not making that concession anymore, as the 12 and 12 mini screens look amazing, plain and simple. For the vast majority of people looking to get an upper class iPhone right now, I think 100% the iPhone 12 is going to be the best choice. It's not the cheapest at $800, but I do think the value is really good, and again, you are getting nearly all of the premium features of the better models. They do only have 64 gigabytes to start, which is a lot less than the 128 with the 12 Pro, but going up only $50, you can get 128 gigs on your 12, and that's exactly what I did with my beautiful blue iPhone 12. This put it at a still solid $150 less than the 12 Pro, a price reduction that I think is worth it for most people. As for the 12 mini, it's a bit harder to recommend. Yes, it's $100 cheaper, but it's also much smaller at only 5.4 inches as opposed to the 6.1. You can see my friend with fairly large hands holding his here, and here it is compared to the original iPhone SE, which is the same size as the iPhone 5. Ultimately, it's up to you. Just make sure you really want a small phone if you do get the mini, but at the end of it all, the iPhone 12 and 12 mini are both great value, and I fully recommend them, even over the 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max. But going down one more peg in Apple's current lineup, you have the iPhone 11 at $600. $600 for this phone is an amazing price. It's such a good phone, with still super fast specs, a terrific camera, and an ultra-wide lens, and a brilliant battery. This is the best phone to buy for the average user in my opinion. It's gonna last a really long time, it's a joy to use, and everyone I know who's had it have given very few complaints. The only real downside of the iPhone 11, and this goes for the XR as well, which I'll get to in a moment, is the display. While it is 6.1 inches, so the same as the iPhone 12, albeit chunkier with thicker bezels, it's LCD instead of OLED, and at only an okay resolution of just over 720p. So while content on it looks good, the colors aren't nearly as vibrant as the 12, and things just won't look quite so sharp. If you're an enthusiast or an advanced tech user, or are coming from a recent Android that likely would have an OLED panel, I do think moving up to the iPhone 12 would be worth it. But in the vast majority of cases, I think saving your money and getting almost just as great a phone with the iPhone 11 is the way to go. It's such good value right now. I think for the majority of 2021, the iPhone 11 is going to be the phone I consistently recommend to basically anyone who will be buying new. But if $600 is just a little too much for your taste, the $500 iPhone XR should pique your interest. It looks very similar to the iPhone 11 with more vibrant color options, but it does only have have one camera lens, which means no ultra-wide photos. The main camera is also not as good and doesn't have the option to take night mode photos. Beyond that, the specs are similar and the phones are basically identical, at least to the eyes of most users. Is it worth saving $100 for? Personally, I'd say go for the 11, just for the extra camera lens and slightly better tech specs, but if you find a deal for the 10R or would rather just save a little money, it's absolutely worth the price of admission, and I think you'll really like it. And going down even further to the final iPhone Apple is selling, we have the $400 iPhone SE. It came out in early 2020 and looks like the iPhone 8 with the home button and the older style bezels, but has the A13 chipset, putting it equivalent with the iPhone 11 for speeds. The camera is downgraded though, being basically on par with the iPhone XR, if a little bit worse. It has the iPhone 8 sensor, but software improves it significantly. This phone isn't bad, and on the surface it looks pretty great, but for only $100 more you're getting a much bigger and frankly, in my opinion, better phone in the iPhone XR. It's not quite as fast, but it wins pretty much every other category, especially battery life. Unfortunately, the iPhone SE has a very small battery, and because of that, while it will last you the day in most cases, if you're using it even the upper side of moderately, or if you're using it heavily, you're going to want to keep a charger nearby. Not to mention a year or two down the line from now when the battery has inevitably degraded, it's just going to get worse. So is the iPhone SE worth it at $400? Yes, but the iPhone XR and 11 are just better value, and I recommend going to one of them. But if you're insistent on keeping the home button, or perhaps are looking at a phone for a grandparent or someone who won't use it a whole lot and maybe just prefers keeping things simple, which is totally fair, then the iPhone SE is very much a great option. And that's about it for Apple's current lineup. I have to say, it looks pretty solid right now with a phone for basically anyone, but if you're the type of person who would rather save some money by going with the used option, then the next section here is for you. Let's start this off with the most recently discontinued iPhone, the iPhone 11 Pro and 11 Pro Max. Like the iPhone 10 and 10s, the iPhone 11 Pro was completely replaced by the iPhone 12 Pro and is no longer being sold by Apple. That being said, that doesn't mean it's a bad phone by any means. It's still amazing and feels like a flagship. However, because Apple isn't selling it, it's going to be a little bit difficult to find, and you're probably going to have to turn to the used market, at least after most stores have cleared out their inventory. Practically speaking, I can't think of much reason why you would go for this phone over, say, a 12 or a 12 Pro, but you could save a little bit of money going for it if you're okay with buying used. I've been seeing them on eBay.com from $700 to $800 or so, which isn't too bad, and if you're getting a very good condition model and you're okay with buying used and you're getting a good deal, then buying a used 11 Pro could be a good choice. That being said, it's really up to you, and I think personally I would rather spend that $800 on just a brand new iPhone 12, as it's gonna be basically just as good if not better, just without the telephoto camera lens and frosted glass. Then there's the iPhone XS. The XS is basically the iPhone 10, but it has an S after. That's a really simplified version of what it is, but there's not a ton to talk about here. There's actually two models. There's the XS and the XS Max. They tend to go for around $500, $400, $500, maybe even $600 on eBay. Kind of depends where you're looking, and that's not too bad. $400 for an iPhone XS honestly is pretty decent. You're getting a really nice OLED panel. The biggest thing you need to watch out for is the battery life. They were never that good in the first place, and if the phone's been pretty decently used over the last couple years, it may have degraded and you might have trouble getting through the day. So just keep that in mind, but buying the iPhone XS refurbished or used, not a bad choice if, again, you're comfortable with doing so. Then there's the iPhone 10. Can't forget the iPhone 10. This phone's more like $300 now on eBay, which is crazy to think about, but that's actually a pretty decent deal for a very solid smartphone. Obviously, it's a bit behind now. The camera doesn't hold up nearly as well as the newer ones. It's still fine, but it's just not as good. But the screen is still fantastic, and it's still fairly fast with the A11 chipset. So for $300, if you want an iPhone 10, I'd say it's worth picking up. Is it more worth it than the XS? That's up to you. I think it really depends. If you're finding a XS for $400, which is like only maybe $100 more than you would pay for a 10, it's probably worth it. Just look around for a deal that suits your needs and a phone that hopefully has a good battery in it. Same as the XS, the iPhone 10's never had an amazing battery, and now that it's 3 years old, that's only getting worse, so just watch out for that. Then there's the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus. The iPhone 8 Plus is very expensive still. It's in quite high demand because it's the last plus-size home button iPhone Apple's made, so we're looking at about as much money as the iPhone 10, if not more in some cases, so $250, $300, $350. Again, it depends where you look, but personally I wouldn't pay more than like $200, maybe $250 for an 8 Plus. I think that the iPhone XR at $500 is worth going up to. Now, clearly that's quite the jump, but you're getting a better phone. That being said, the iPhone 8 Plus has a great battery. It's still quite fast. The camera's pretty good. My mom uses the 8 Plus and she's gotten some great shots. So if you're going used, it is a phone worth considering, especially if you want to keep that home button. The smaller iPhone 8, I just wouldn't get straight up. It's cheaper, but the battery life is going to be kind of brutal, more than likely. It also has a reduced RAM compared to newer iPhones, so it's going to be a bit slower and probably won't feel as speedy in the next couple of years. So if you're interested in the iPhone 8, I'd really look to get an iPhone SE at $400 because it is an iPhone 8, just faster and better. So, you know, you might as well try to get the better version. Next, you've got the iPhone 7 Plus, of course, which is more like $200. It varies a lot, $250, $200. Again, with eBay, it's so inconsistent. You just got to look around. If you find a deal for an iPhone 7 Plus, it could be worth it. I think I'd recommend going for an 8 Plus over a 7 Plus just because you might as well get the best Plus iPhone you can, but it's not too bad. The smaller iPhone 7 is quite cheap at more like $100 to $150. If you could find it as low as $100, it's absolutely worth that. I didn't see any quite that low, but I did see them around 150 quite commonly. And that, yeah, that's just a pretty decent deal. Obviously, battery is going to be the big thing. It's not going to be very good unless you get it replaced. That's just probably how it's going to be. That being said, if you just need a really basic phone to get you through things, the iPhone 7 is still fully supported. It feels pretty fast, and so it's not a bad choice whatsoever. Going even lower, you have the iPhone 6s and 6s Plus. 6s Plus is around $150, $125. Again, it varies as always. It's okay. I would really recommend going for an iPhone 7 or an iPhone 8 over the 6s at this point, and that's mostly because it is the last supported iPhone on iOS 14, that and the original iPhone SE, which means it may not get iOS 15 at the end of this year. In fact, I'd say it's likely it probably won't, and so that is something you need to keep in mind. It might not be supported soon. So personally, I would go for a better device, but if you can find one for as low as $100, and good luck on that, it is worth it. As for the smaller 6s, that one can be found for under $100, which is a good deal. It's still, you know, a totally usable phone, and it is fully supported. It doesn't feel slow. So $100 or less than $100 for a smaller iPhone 6s, it's worth it. So just keep in mind you're getting a phone that may not last you very long if you want to keep up to date. But I promised you guys a $50 phone, and here we are, the smaller original iPhone SE. It came out in early 2016 and is basically just a small iPhone 6s, and it can be found for as low as $50. It can also be found for much more than that, so you need to look around. $50 is clearly the low end, and you're probably not getting the nicest SE for that, but it is fully supported on iOS 14, which means it can do basically everything despite how cheap and how much older it is. So that's quite impressive, and if you're on a pure budget and just need something, anything, then the iPhone SE is a good choice. And that's about it for the used iPhones. So now, to summarize, what iPhone should you buy? Well, if you want the best of the best, obviously the iPhone 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max are there for you. But for most people who just want like a really great iPhone, I'd say save a little bit of money and get the iPhone 12, 12 mini if you really like small phones. But for most people, the iPhone 12, $800, you're getting an amazing phone. If you're someone who just wants a new iPhone, but you don't necessarily want it to be the best, you just need a new iPhone and you want it to be good, the iPhone 11 is for you. It's $600, and that's amazing value for what is still basically flagship status when it comes to an iPhone. Obviously, the screen is downgraded and not everyone's going to be okay with that, but for the average user, you probably won't even notice, and it's a great phone. Very fast, great camera. I don't think most will complain. The iPhone XR is there if you want to save a little bit, but the iPhone 11 for me is going to be the phone to buy. The $400 iPhone SE is really niche, and so I generally won't recommend it. $400 when you could pay $100 more and get the XR, it's a tough call there. So for most, I would say probably avoid the SE unless you just really want that simple home button experience. And then if you're going to the used market, it's a little bit tougher. I generally recommend buying new because there can be a lot of bad experiences that come from buying used. You can get something you really didn't expect or is much worse than you expected, or breaks down the line much quicker than you would think it would break. You know, try to stick with buying new. But if you do want used, I laid out all the options, but I think the iPhone 7 and 8 are going to be probably the ones to look for. And of course the iPhone SE at around $50 or, you know, a bit more than that. But that's an amazing deal for a phone that will work in the short term. It's fully supported on iOS 14, and that's amazing. Probably not going to get iOS 15. I say probably because we don't know for sure, but there's just no beating that value. And so that's about it. I think I'm about done here. Let me know what phone you're looking for or what iPhone you've already bought in the comments down below. Hopefully this video helped you, and if it did, maybe hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content just like this. You can follow me over on Twitter and Instagram at 91_tech if you'd like to for some reason. And with that all being said, thank you so much for watching. I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.